139. This little header is wrong. 139, This Life in Tech. I'm Jason.
And I'm TK.
And we're Danless, so we can have adult conversations again. I don't know what that guy's up to. He must maybe sore from softball.
Actually, he's probably in the batting cage this morning because he's back in softball and he fancies himself still an athlete.
Either that or he's just walking the street.
He turned sideways and looked in the mirror really. So, poor Dan.
Oh, Dan. Oh, Dan. Oh, man.
You know, he invites abuse, so it'd be rude not to accept it.
Yeah. Look, man, I'm perfectly comfortable with who I am at this point in my life.
No doubt, yeah. Make fun of me. I don't care.
Yeah, man. You want to call me Mario? Good. I'm the world's most recognizable video game character. Great. That's a compliment. What's that?
There could be worse things in life.
Yeah. Yeah, fuck by fire, man.
Yeah.
Oh, so check this out. I've been thinking about this. We were going to talk about this last week, but we went way off the rails into a really interesting conversation last week. So at High Point, we're getting ready to start our cyber program. And I basically broke it down for everybody two ways. Look, you can create an operations pathway or you can create a defense pathway. And there's ramifications. Long story short, while operations is sexy and cool, I don't know that that's a wise choice for us right now. So let's do defense. And there's a lot of honor and prestige in learning how to defend efficiently. So that's the way we're going. But in that, I've been thinking about if a student comes in and says, hey, look, I'm into defense, but I really want to develop cutting edge technology and deploy it, let's say, to like the teams. I have no idea how to advise somebody on that. What's your opinion?
Let's start from they're freshmen right now, and you want them to have some measure of learning defense.
Mm-hmm.
My belief, and I share it with the Cyber Academy folks, is that in order to be really good at defense, you need to be good at offense. Right? And so being offensive minded from day one, I think really helps you to be a good defender. Right? And my layman's example is in the NFL, some of the best defensive coaches were offensive players. Tony Dungy was probably one of the best defensive coaches before he became the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Invented a whole new way of looking at defending the pass, and it became the standard in some ways for a lot of other teams, right? Because everything's a copycat league, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He was a quarterback in college, right? When he got to the NFL, he played. I think he got drafted by the Steelers. He went there, and this was back in the 70s, and they were like, "Hey, nice try. Let's put you on defense." And so then he became a defensive back, right? And I look at it in that light that if you want to understand how to defend something, you have to understand how to attack it.
Agreed.
And I'll give you another example. The Germans, obviously after World War II, everything was destroyed in basically maritime. Like between the 8th Air Force and the British Royal Air Force, they pile drived every bit of their will and ability to make war. Right. And so when they
Mm-hmm.
rebuilt after the war, they don't use wooden piers. Right. Everything is steel.
Mm-hmm.
And the big threat were combat swimmers or frogmen. Men in the water are going to put limpet mines in there. So they use their frogmen to design the defenses. Right. And I think that's the start. All right. So once you get through the education, the basic education pathway of, let's say, a bachelor's, and you want to get out in the world, you want to start working. I think right now there are tons of small cutting edge companies that are doing kick-ass work, right? And they're going to recruit left, right, and center, right? And a lot of them are companies you would know, right? Amazon, for example, Microsoft, they're two of the big boys. And then there's the big defense contractor, Booz Allen's, khakis, Raytheons, all those. And those filter down into a next level of kind of this is my term, are boutique defense contractors.
Yeah, sure.
When I worked at Blackbird, right? They've subsequently been acquired by Raytheon. And while you might not be a prime contractor, and this wades into the bureaucracy of defense contracting and the paperwork piece, not the delivery of goods and services.
Right.
There's a certain level of contract that you can engage in. When I was at RSA last year, a good friend of mine who's the CEO of Wicker invited me to this thing called the Offset Symposium and got me a pass. And it's some of the most forward-thinking and forward discussions about global contracting. And one of the tracks with global defense contracting, and they did a comparison about how China does it versus how we do it. Right?
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that defense contracting as a business is so Byzantine is because the government says, look, we need goods and services, but we also need a level of oversight to make sure that everything's going to work the way it works, and especially in the cyber side or in computers, but they're not infected with all sorts of things. And so you have NIAP compliance for everything. You've got CSFC for mobile devices and all of these different things. If you want to get into mobile security around the government, everybody just give me a call. Not all at once, all right, but give me a call, because there's so many cool companies doing all these different cutting edge things for deployment of mobile services to the government.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from Samsung down to down to the MDMs, down to people that are giving you the ability to lock your device, wipe, to do embedded communications in a way that it hasn't been done before. Right. Do the secure voice and messaging companies. Right. It's a piece of cyber. Right. But a lot of times, you can do so much good work at one of these small companies because the business that they can get is very specific. And because they're smaller companies, you're not employee number 65,433.
Right.
Or, I was 2K to the CEO. Right? And what we did mattered to a certain segment of the business because we were a gateway to other customers. We became important. Right?
Yeah.
So we primarily work. There's different segments. Am I going to be big DoD? Am I going to be the Intel community? Am I going to be SOCOM? Where do those overlap, right? And how do we wedge ourselves in there? And a lot of times you end up wedging yourself in. As a smaller company, which I like, you've got to find a prime contractor for no other reason than the whatever agency or who you're delivering that to, they need to have indemnity.
Yeah.
And that indemnity comes through that bigger contractor because of their book of business and how they deliver.
Right.
But I think more and more you're getting companies that are non-traditional deliverers of goods, specifically in AI and cloud computing, right? Because the government was last to the party, and they're not saying it, especially in cloud computing, not for no other reason than how did we indemnify that cloud to ensure that it was secure in the same way that we ensure terrestrial networks were secure.
Right. So see, this is kind of give me your feedback on this, because this is kind of my vision for what I'm trying to set up at High Point. I've been at other universities, and this conversation when you're talking about freshman to senior to workforce inevitably revolves around like internships or senior projects, right?
Yep.
And developing a portfolio so that you can go out into the world and leaving your studentship and becoming some kind of agent for good, hopefully, in the world, right? And what comes up is, let's set up a partnership between the university, the department, and Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Or this big company, Google. And hey, I'm not going to knock it, but what I'm really interested in are trying to build a small but stable portfolio of these small boutique shops that work on really hard cutting edge problems.
Yeah, they're out there. I mean, I was up in DC this week, and I talked to a couple of them. Talked to one of my friends. He's like the bon vivant around DC with the mobile area. He knows everybody, and he's carved out quite a good business for himself. Because they're like, if you're struggling to get something done in the mobile industry in DC, that kind of B2G, the government, he's the man. Like, I got, like my thing when I say, hey, I got a guy, he's got a guy. Like, he's got a guy for everything. And I would say this. I would start. I like. I mean, internships are great because they validate that you're learning, right? To a certain extent, and it depends. I think as much as we goof on Dan, I think Dan really does a great job of managing and running interns, and he does it like it's not a circle. He had one of his former interns run the interns, right? And
Yeah,
I thought it was
yeah,
a great idea, right? And remember when we came up with the T-shirts for DEF CON one year, and it was
yeah,
power of privacy, but we spelled it in Klingon.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think for DEF CON and Black Hat, perfect, right? There was two 14-year-olds that were interns that came up with the idea, and
Right.
all of the all of the employees were asked up that their idea didn't get picked. But when I'd stood in the middle of the room and all these said, anybody who thinks they want to contribute to this, please come into the conference room. We'll have a discussion about kind of standards of conduct with what I want to see with this T-shirt, so we don't waste our time on something that I'm never going to pick because it's inappropriate. And the best idea is going to win. And here's the 4 or 5 people that are going to decide. And the two 14-year-old twins that were there, it was the best idea. And people were actually mad, right? And so
I remember.
they were furious. They were furious because two 14s, I said, look, they're twins. That's actually a 28-year-old, so don't feel so bad.
Yeah, right.
Those girls are now off in their sophomore year of college at Virginia Tech, and they're killing it, doing great things. All right, it's Julia. I'm friends with their mom. All right, and so the first question I always ask their mom every time I talk to her is, "Hey, how the girls doing?" Right, because they did amazing stuff for us. Right, and that's because they weren't being managed by a 40-something-year-old. They were being managed by a 25-year-old who, while older, still was effectively in the same understood the same social mores and social cues. And I think that's good. Here's what I think, especially when it comes to software development and solving really hard problems. By the time somebody's a junior, if they don't know what the really hard problems are, and more importantly, if their professors don't know in the world is, you need to unlock the front gate to the university and have them look outside. Right?
Yeah.
That's a big problem. University settings, they get insular. Right?
Yes.
And we've said this before. Nothing's really that important at a university. You get up, you go to, as long as you show up on time, and you put out material that's leading them to the next step, right? And they do their homework and they turn it in and they test and you grade everything, it moves on. And because of that, while it's important, it's not difficult, right? I mean, it's not, the path is relatively well established and it's a simple concept to consume. Yes, do people get myopic when they do things like that? Why? Because future success depends on that. Your success in the classroom today depends on your tenure application is depending on everything you do from now until the time you get through that tenure process, right?
Right.
And then after that, your reputation depends on it, right? And those are important things. But I think in higher education, because there's such a myopic nature of it, people look at the problems in the theoretical. And and what internships do are put a practical nature to that.
Yes.
Please tell me that by the time these kids are juniors, they at least go to the internet and look at what the big problems of the day are. Or because they're using mobile devices, because they're learning how to code, because they're moving on that coder path, coder programmer, computer scientist path, or engineering path, wherever they're at, right? That they now can see a hard problem.
Right. Well, and this ties into what we were talking about in the very beginning with, our idea of part of fatherhood is this moderation of chaos and how much you expose your children to it. And I look at these kids the same way, where because the fundamental friction is between my role is to educate you, but at some point you need to actualize that into training so that you can actually go do real stuff in the world.
Well,
right?
what it is you have to create a culture of inquisitiveness. Right? That's how these hard problems are solved, because one person gets inquisitive about it, another person does. And it's funny, in engineering, computer science, the hard sciences, right? One of our big problems in the world today is everybody gets triggered if they don't disagree with you, right? And like I said, we don't disagree about everything, and it's fine. You're an educated individual who's good to humanity and has a perfectly valid opinion, even if I disagree with it.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Right?
There's more than enough room for both of us.
Right. And you act like adults. But if I come out and say I'm for something and somebody else is vehement against it and they say I'm a racist, bigot, whatever, that's your starting point, like you've lost.
Yeah, right. There's really
You're
nowhere
not-
to go after that.
Well, yeah, like we're done talking because you don't want to understand why I feel this way, right? And more importantly, you don't want to try to say, "Hey, I hear what you're saying, and I think it's a valid opinion, but what about this? Look at something else." In science, a lot of that's mitigated. And I mean, we were in when I was at Blackbird, Cooper invented something really cool, and everybody at the company, and this is the value again. We talk about the value of being in a small company. We told our VP, he immediately ran into the three founders. Right, that's the access. That was how flat the organization was. And they said, "Come on up and show us." So we went up to DC, and we sat there. Well, one of Cooper's roommates from college was working there as well. Both electrical engineers, both hyper competitive in their fields. Louis missed the fact that this was the beta that we're showing. And the CEO of the company and both the other founders are sitting there, and he starts ripping into him about what he hasn't done with it.
Ooh.
And like my VP's like, "What's going on over there?" I go, "It's just two electrical engineers that have been doing this since because they both went to college. They've been doing it since they were 18 years old."
Mm-hmm.
I said, and I'm pretty sure Louis doesn't know that this is a beta. He thinks it's a finished product. And so finally, I just walked over there and said, "Hey, this is a beta demo right now, right? You guys can argue about it like you're in your dorm room in 1995 a little bit later, right?"
Yeah.
But that was a great discussion they were having. It wasn't confrontational. It just wasn't appropriate for the time space. It was, Cooper was like, "Yeah, I thought of that. Just we're not there yet." And Louis wasn't getting it because he went right to, "Hey, I'm an engineer. He's an engineer. I want to help make him better."
Right.
That's where it is. But I think now that you can create a reverse internship process where you create a little think tank incubator piece in that thing, and with have a committee of two or three professors, and they come up much like you do in the doctoral process. What's my thesis going to be on, right? But my internship, I want it to be this, and they have topics because they're going to have to, because you're going to have a certain amount of professionals that will volunteer from outside, from industry. And hey, in any of these disciplines, please pick something you think's hard. And hopefully that person that's out in industry will say, here's some of the cutting edge problems that we're working on right now, right? Whether it's in AI or offensive security, whatever that's, endpoint protection, how we do all those things, right? What are they really cutting edge or mobile? And go find somebody from one thing. I'd gladly help with getting the right people in the room to do that. And then make them come to thee and say, "Hey, here's what I'm thinking I want to attack." And then getting a little bit of direction to focus that, right? Because they're going to be very wide, because they're going to try to boil the ocean because they're 18, 19, 20 years old. And they want to change the world. And that's why they're inquisitive and we love them. Right. But you got to go, "Hey, this is great, but bring it in the middle of the room." And
yeah, right.
Run that process, because if they're going to go on, that's how they're going to, they'll know in general at work, here's the big thing, right? And they might be put on something right out of college as part of a bigger project. But as they grow, their ability to grow in responsibility and stature is to look at the big picture and go, "Hey, guys, this is what's being attacked," right? Or have those people come in from us, say, here's the problem we're trying to solve right now. Here's where, have them take a look at it and let them start picking what's hard. Because the first step is they're going to get in the room and they're going to be given tasks, right? Mm-hmm. The tasks, if you have a great manager, the tasks are going to be somewhat challenging, but also somewhat beneath them, right? Yeah. Because I want to see you do the things that you don't want to do that are just mundane but difficult, that make the sausage go, right? Because that's going to tell me who my A player is. Because if you can do the hard, boring stuff well, I think I've told the story before about cleaning toilets on a ship, right? Mm-hmm. From a leadership perspective, you walk around and because when we were on ships, we were just there as guests getting a taxi ride somewhere, right? So I heard some chief, when some E3's like, "Why do I have to clean the toilets?" He's like, "Because when I was in E3, I had to do it." Wrong answer. All right. Hey, look, right now, you lack the skills to do some of this other stuff. When we're in a hurry because we want to get done work, we want to leave, we want to go away for the weekend, whatever it is. And this has to be done. And right now, today, in order to best help the team, I need you to do this. What I'm telling you is when we're not in this crunch for time, we're in the process of training you so that you in crunch time can be competent to do this.
Right. Exactly.
Whatever skill it is you're trained for. That if you start combining all that, I think you might be able to create a reverse intern program. There's no substitute for being able to send people out, but I think along the way is kind of meet in the middle. And
Yes.
you might get some people in industry, because I mean, if you go to the Research Triangle, which isn't that far away from where you're at, think about the amazing things you can find. Computer science work in biotech, right? Because that's big in the Research Triangle, right? And what are we doing and why? What are the problems of AI? Who's your math major that's taking that class? Right? That's the guy you want in AI.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head with kind of how envision this is. So, like, typically, especially when you're starting new degree programs, but usually it's required for accreditation that you have some type of advisory board for the degree itself, right? And that's usually a mix of like professionals. I like having a student or two on there, and they kind of give you a view of, okay, this is what the degree should be producing in terms of education. My idea, you have the right term for it. I didn't think of it this way. Reverse internship is, okay, so that's your degree pathway. So you take this class in this semester, and at the end you end up here. That's one thing. But I also have the ability to produce this amazing lab experience, right? I already have my room, so forth and so on. And the idea that I'm kind of trying to drive towards is, in addition to the advisory board, if I can find some of these really hyper-specialized boutique firms that have hard problems that can farm a small piece out to me to work on, now I can create internal internships within that lab. So you don't have to leave. It's controlled chaos, and you can practice becoming better. And you can practice all the way up, right? Are the computers all powered on when we need them? Is the room clean? Right? Start there.
Pants and shoes.
Yeah, right? And keep everything orderly, because there's enough chaos where we're going, right? Save the hard shit for the hard shit, right?
Yeah.
And then you can get like these little pieces of what are real projects that aren't the most critical components, but they're chaos to a freshman or a sophomore, that when you're a junior and you're ready to actually go get an internship out in the world, you're not blasted away by all the real chaos. That's kind of the idea I have.
Right. And I think that also teaches people how to consume problems in the proper amount.
Yeah.
In anything in life, when you look at something and go, I can't do that, it's because they look at it in its entirety. They don't look at, hey, I've got to start with this small piece. And where do I start eating the elephant? Right? That kind of thing. I'm not going to eat the whole thing at one time. So I can't worry about everything. What can I fix right now?
Right.
What's the near target? What's the closest thing to me that needs to be done that I can do today? Raise my hand and say, I'll fix that while somebody else is fixing something else. Because,
exactly.
I mean, the other thing you're preparing them to do is be part of a team.
Yes.
Right.
And so then I think the beauty of those kinds of partnerships are, like when we were at Science Circle, we had really hard problems to work on that all of us as, let's say, mature professionals were prepared to work on.
Right.
But there was a lot of stuff that was day-to-day stuff that was menial for us, that for a freshman or a sophomore is really hard.
Well, like with Greg, making sure that the app integrity is there, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, it is a mundane task, but it can bring down the company if it's not done correctly.
Right. And so my idea,
Greg was excited every day to show up and beat the app up in the next generation and punch it in the side of the head and come back and say, good job, guys, but you forgot to, in this update, you didn't properly do the cert pinning, right? And then
I remember that.
Then my breathing gets shallow before we release it, right? But you're right. It's like, hey, you could think about the high-minded ideas, but somebody's got to take the trash out too. And I don't mean that in a demeaning way. You've got to grow into that level.
Yes.
And there's one guy in every group that is thinking 8 steps ahead of everybody else, even when he's the new guy, to quote what we talked a couple weeks ago, right? And it's probably the leader to figure that out and find it for him.
Right. And so if I can find the right partnerships that have the right amount of trash that needs to be taken out, I can take that load off of you so that you can concentrate on solving the true hard part of the problem, to me, that's like a symbiotic, balanced relationship.
I think the other thing that is for me, it would be a selling point is a lot of these small firms, they miss out on the top interns because all those folks want to go to Google. They want to go to Facebook. They want to go to these big companies because they want to have that on their resume.
Yeah, right,
When
right.
you make me the CEO of a small company that's doing $10-12 million a year, just doing some boutique software stuff, even if it's just a piece of technology that gets embedded in something else, it's not anything our company name's ever going to be known for. I know I can give that dude a better recommendation than something, but you're talking directly to the people that want to hire him and why, right?
Right.
I think it's all on how you sell it. I think that to sell it to these smaller boutique firms that are doing some really kick-ass work, go, hey, look, we want to put in front of you the best interns we have before they get loose and are part of an intern cohort of 50 at the Washington, D.C. office of Google or Amazon.
Right.
That kind of thing. Or at the Charlotte office of Salesforce.
Right.
Right.
Well, and so for the students, then the way I look at it is, so like I don't know if you remember this. I have a stepson. My wife has a son from a prior marriage, and he's 19, and he chose to stay in California when we moved here. You're an adult. That's a good choice for you. But what I've tried to counsel him is, you got to understand the scale of economy here. You're in a city that's a suburb of Los Angeles, and for the job you want, you're going to be competing with millions of people.
Yes.
That's a huge number. Whereas if you were here, you're competing with maybe 10,000.
Right.
I mean, I've just learned in my life that I'd much rather be like a medium fish in a medium pond or a big fish in a small pond. And I feel like I can contribute to the world more effectively that way. Like you said, instead of being employee 65,633, right? And so that's kind of the experience I personally want to try and cultivate for my lab is, look, yeah, I can get you into MIT. I've done it. I can get you into Google and Facebook. I've done that for people. But hey, there's this other option over here, which if we talk about it, might be at least better for you. And maybe it's more noble, depending on where you want to end up in life. But it's more of a guarantee than this.
Because they should be doing multiple internships, right? I'm not saying don't go do the Google one. But
no.
When you graduate, it's like I was in Chapel Hill basketball camp, right? My life revolves around going to basketball camps, right? Right outside campus. First off, little boutique office. I mean, like second floor, just a placeholder office. Google. 2 doors down, Salesforce. 3 doors down. Why? Because they're coming out at graduation with a butterfly net and capturing all these kids before they can get anywhere else. Right? And they've got offices all around the world. Carnegie Mellon is probably one of the best schools for graduate degrees in applied mathematics.
Yep.
And it used to be, before you used to have a little script that ran in the background, like, when you'd see if you use no script on your browser, you drop down and see all those scripts. Those companies one of them sold for like $2.5 billion. There were 5 people that worked there, and there was one business dude, one business graduate, and 4 PhDs in applied math. And those dudes their primary office was in Pittsburgh, and every May they'd grab one more guy from Carnegie Mellon, right?
Yeah.
Being able to tune those algorithms to give valid data was huge. And like I said, they got scooped up by Yahoo for like $2 billion, right?
Right.
Somebody work at some big boy company, right, for a summer, right? And just go, how do you like that? And then, or do an internship, do a tech internship at a non-tech company.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Do a tech internship at an investment bank, at a financial house, right? Because some of the most cutting edge cybersecurity work is being done at hedge funds, at investment banks and stuff like that. Why? Because they're using technology to be able to, it used to be, they just want the fastest hardware so they can run their algorithms as fast as they can to execute that. Now they're at the cutting edge of installing AI in there to start to be able to trend better and trend faster and then execute it on the fastest hardware known to man. Or now they're starting to use the power of the cloud. And and everything like that, right? And so go to a tech company, right? Go to where everybody around you is like you. And then go to the basement of a financial house where all the quants are, as they call them, and just get worn out with trying to do that. Because I think that's challenging as well.
Yeah, and so the idea is that you have these smaller staged or what we call scaffolded experiences that
Yeah.
at the end, this is like my obsession, right?
Hmm.
At some point, we got to figure out how to get the fuck out of this solar system, right? And this is huge out there, right? And so that's a huge, hard, maybe insolvable problem. But if we start now, maybe we can scaffold our way towards it, right?
Right.
So for me, I want to produce students that at the end of their educational experience, no matter what state the world is in, what's going on, and how where we're at in this big vision, you can be plopped into a situation, and because you're educated and you have this scaffolded practical experience, you can be immediately productive.
Right.
You still have scaffolding to go, right? Because you have to mature. But it doesn't matter what industry you end up in, what size it is, you can immediately be productive, right?
Right. I think for this group of students now, and certainly up in through the millennials, although like your oldest millennial is now 34, so it does sound kind of silly, right? But
Right.
a group of younger people, especially those that are either just graduated or grad, I think one of the things that they have a tremendous advantage of intellectually is money's not the most important thing to them. It's not their prime driver. They want to be able to have a lifestyle and thing, but it's not their prime driver. And part of their lifestyle is feeling that they contribute in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's right.
And I think understanding the psychology of the people you're training, right? It's you hear me say this all the time. I can't raise my kids the way I was raised because I don't live in they don't live in the world I grew up in.
Right.
Well,
Right.
education is the highest apogee of that, right? You can't just walk into a classroom and tell kids something, right? When I was in high school, it was before the internet, right? It was in the 70s and 80s. And when I got to college, we grew up. If an adult told me to do something, the policeman on the corner, right? I was allowed to get on public transportation when I was 13 years old with friends or cousins and stuff like that, and go down to a baseball game at Fenway, like in downtown Boston, with a bunch of kids. We get off public transportation. We walk there. We get a ticket for $5. We've got, you know, we've got enough money to get back and forth, and we get a hot dog. And we go sit out in the booth and learn every bit of foul language known to man. All right? There's no way you'd ever let a kid do that today, right? There's absolutely, and child protective services would be your house that afternoon, right? So just alone. But we placed a lot of trust and confidence in adults, no more so than those people that stood in front of us and educated us.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if you, I remember in high school challenging, I was a junior, I just challenged the premise of a history teacher. It was just based on what I read because I was interested in history. I'm like, I don't think it happened that way. And he got mad. Right. And it became just answer the question the way I put it on the test, you'll get an A. Right. So you learn how to be good little robots and move forward. Right. But if you think about it, post World War II, when they put wage and price controls and everything and started giving everybody insurance and that vacation and working towards a retirement and the American dream of a picket fence, that was all to keep all the little robots in line so we could become the industrial might that we are today.
That's right.
And then as computing started to take over, right? And in the mid 70s is when, mid to late 70s was when Microsoft showed up, when, Apple showed up, and all of these, the companies that were starting to build the backbone of what is now the internet. It was post-Vietnam, right? And we moved into, hey, wait a second. What did we just do for the past 15 years in Vietnam? And why didn't anybody say, hey, what the hell are you guys doing? Right, publicly. We just, and that's what created a lot of the great upheaval of the late 60s and certainly the 70s, right? And it was at a time where we had a president in Jimmy Carter who was a nice man, but he was an abysmal failure as a president because we had double-digit inflation, double-digit unemployment, and the hostages had been held for 444 days, and we couldn't seem to get out of our way to figure out how to say, hey, you just can't scoop our people off the street, and we had an energy crisis, and we had everything else, right? I mean, so much so that, I truly believe this, that people were fed up, and there was a way that they could, in a very small way, fight the man.
Yeah.
In mid 70s, we said, hey, we're going to go to the metric system, right? And by 1980, all the imperial signage was coming down, and it's going to be all metric. We just ignored it. We said, no, we're not. And everybody just gave up on it, right? And my favorite meme, when people which is it's my favorite meme because it doesn't really get to the point, but it's funny. They have it's a Mercator projection of the globe, and so the U.S. is colored in blue, and then you've got the pie chart down at the bottom explaining what it is, and it says in white countries that use the metric system, and in blue countries that have been to the moon. Right? You know, but the thing is, it was engineering to get them there. Everything was done in the metric system. It has to be. You have to work on base 10 to do this kind of stuff, right? You can't just be, we're going, you know, when it landed, they were telling the American people, hey, they're 20 feet off the ground. And they guarantee you they were saying we're too, you know, internally, we're, you know, it was being read in meter.
Right.
It was funny, right? But then when I got to college, there were these buttons, and it was on everything. T-shirts, question authority, right? And
yes.
we got teachers that had been educated post-Vietnam. Dr. Bill Coughlin, right? You know, we talked about everybody's got educated along the way that you feel changed their life, right? I was an engineering major, and going to English class was an impediment to me studying for other stuff, right? He stood up the first day of class and said, hey, look, I want all of you for 10 minutes to put as much effort into this as you do all your other hard science stuff. And I get it, it's an engineering school, but the written and spoken word's never going to go out of style.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a retired, or actually not retired, he was a former special forces guy in Vietnam. And he taught that way. I wrote my first paper. I had all A's in English in high school and everything like that. I wrote my first paper. About halfway through it, he drew a line and put F. I'm not going to read any more of this shit. Right? I was like, I'm sorry, what? And go to his office, right? And he's like, hey, go read Hemingway. Like, start with an economy of words. I know that you're well spoken. I don't need to see you on every paper. And start thinking about what you want to say and why. And I ended up taking a lot more classes than I actually had to for a minor in English. And largely because my dad was he was a big engineer at General Electric. He said, hey, I got all these engineers that work for me, and not one of them can write it down and articulate what they're doing, right? And I think that's a great path for anybody in math and science, you know, engineering to take, because you have to be able to explain the product of your work. And it can't just be on an app and go, ta-da, but it's needs to be written down, even if it's just in the comment sections of the code.
Mm-hmm. Right.
John Callis has the best line I've ever said. If you don't properly comment your code, you're destined to be stuck maintaining it for the rest of your life, and you won't ever grow. Because nobody will be able to come in behind you and pick up the ball and run while you go to the next great thing. I think that's a life lesson.
Yeah.
Right? You have to do two things. You have to comment yourself, right, as you grow and mature, so that you have a historical reference of what you did and don't have blinders to the fact of your weaknesses or your strengths. Right. And, you know, like Dan said, you know, it's like if you become an executive or whatever in life, you became a professor, you have to be more self-aware about your weaknesses so that you don't hoist them upon students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In my mind, for me, that all started with that question authority. Right. Well, I'll never forget this question because I never forget the rabid answers of it. Professor said, hey, if tomorrow we could eradicate nukes around the world, that was big back in the 80s, eradicate nukes around the world, should the U.S. sign that treaty? And because we grew up in such an fervent anti-Soviet time, the height of the Cold War, everybody's like, no, the Soviets do this. He's like, no, I just said we're going to eradicate them from the globe. Right? We're not talking about people cheating on a treaty or anything. We've come up with a thing, and it was that to say, hey, listen to the question and then start thinking. Mm-hmm. Right? And that was what is at the corner of question authority was, right? And I think that's the best thing young people can do. And I think we're getting, with a lot of from my limited vision, and you're there every day. And I think, although I think a private university in somewhat rural North Carolina is different than Berkeley or different than Harvard type of thing. I think the university system's lost that. They want compliance and they want conformity to an opinion, right? And if you disagree with that or you challenge that, even if to say, well, why is it that way? Then you're going to be thought of as less than, right? And that's driving, I think, a lot of the bad behavior we have today, where you can't question authority anymore, right? You can't question the dominant paradigm because there used to be a big bumper sticker as well, say question the dominant paradigm, right? And then everybody started using the word paradigm, and I wouldn't listen to you unless you could actually do where the G went. Right? G would need to be properly placed. They didn't want to hear from you, right? But it's one of the things like that I admire about you and Dan is things like you said, hey, on some intermediate path, I want to get a doctorate, right? Which is a hard slog, right? There's a reason that a lot of people have a bachelor's degree and 2 or 3 master's degrees, because the threshold for another master's degree after you have one is usually half the work of the first one, because all the courses for like all the baseline course, especially if it's in somewhat the same discipline, it becomes an easy thing, right? That what do they call it? Terminal education. Like that terminal education, that's hard. It needs to be hard for a reason, right? And it can't be hard just because, hey, I don't want to go out in the world and do anything. I want to stay and be an educator. I think you strike the right balance where you go do projects for business and everything like that, so that when you come back and teach, what you're putting out is relevant. Right?
Yeah, that's a big thing.
And I think that's where adjunct professors, especially in science and technology and engineering, I think that's where adjunct professors really kill it with students, is because they're not solving a theoretical problem. They're saying, hey, we're going to be high-minded, but we're also going to be, at the end of this, you've just expended a lot of resources to go to school here. At a minimum, you want to start getting paid for what you did, right? That's the whole purpose of an education.
Right.
And go that way. And I also think there's value for an internship if the school starts, I'm not saying a trade school, but the school starts a coding academy.
Yeah.
But and it's external, it's like, or there's one in the area and you're sending kids out there, students of yours out there to teach, right?
Yes.
Because if all of us have taught in some form or another. Personally, there's nothing more gratifying than being in front of people and watching them get it, right? But you can't be an effective instructor and be selfish. Like, you have to give yourself away to do that. And I think that is hugely important, especially with young people, where we got instant gratification. I want something, boom, I go on my phone and I grab it.
Yeah.
I can talk about this all day, because it's I think how we get the next generation to be competent, right, in whatever discipline they are, to be competent to, hey, because somebody's gonna have to pick out my nursing home, right? Or someone's gonna have to maintain it. Somebody's gonna have to, what's that gonna look like? What are the policies that are gonna be in place when I'm an old man? And Dan, if you're watching this, I get it. When I'm an old man, they are gonna make sure that the next generation is coming up behind us, and hopefully they're doing a better job than we're doing.
Yeah,
but it's got to start with giving. You have to give yourself.
Well, and I think that's where Dan and how he set up the intern program, like with Greg, managing the new interns.
Masterful.
That was the perfect structure, like you said, because Greg is more proximal and affinity group to the interns,
right?
So they'll instantly respect him as a peer, especially because he's actually badass and knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But it also is the next logical way to help Greg grow. Not only because he gets to practice at leadership and he can get a taste of that, but as you were saying, and you and I are on point with this. If you really want to learn, go teach what you think you know.
Oh yeah.
And when you have to actualize what you've internalized, that completely changes it. Like, I'll give you an example. This is why I love High Point, because they actively at the university level support a culture, and they can do this because they're a private school with a ton of money. They actively say our culture is one of critical questioning. So question everything of everybody at any time. Just be reasonable with it, right?
Be respectful.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's part of the paradigm of learning how to engage in professional adult behavior in a debate, right? We can disagree, but anyway. And so I'm teaching discrete mathematics yesterday, which is one of my favorite classes to teach. And I've been teaching this for 10 years. And I had 2 different students ask me 2 different questions that I have never heard before in my life, that actually made me sit down and have to think about it.
Smoke started coming out?
Yeah, I'm like, holy shit, that's actually a really good question, like really good.
Right.
And so then we had to, as a group, walk through the frameworks that we've been exposed to try and come to a reasoned answer.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
I told them, like, look, okay, this seems correct. We're all agreeing this seems correct, but let's all go home over the weekend and do some Googling and find out what do other people think about this, because somebody had to have asked this problem at some point, because if not, we're all writing a paper about it, trust me. Because it's such a really deep question. It seems basic, but I've never heard anybody ask it before.
You just got so much credibility with the students as well, because you're like, I don't know everything. Right?
Dude,
I don't know. I've
never heard that question before in my life.
Right. I don't know is a perfectly valid answer, because it means I'm going to go find out, and we're going to go on an exploratory walk together to figure it out. Right. And that, I think, is another important part of being an educator, is you learn how to be self-effacing. Right. I'm a much better human being today than I was before I stepped in front of my first class at Blackbird. Now, I was an instructor in the Navy and stuff like that, taught skydiving, taught all of these different things, right? But it's totally different when you're teaching something that transfers into people's life like technology does, right?
Right.
I'm to the point now, because we, as you know, we never used to use PowerPoints or anything. We put a computer in front of every student. One student would plug in, so his stuff was up there. And whether it was the command line or learning just the basics of how Windows works to defend yourself so that you're not that guy that's given up everything, right? It's an incredible journey. And one of my favorite things to do early on, like in the first course, I think it was like the second day, we started talking about browsers. And we had a tool that we had that was from another piece of the business, but we would use it as a demonstrator. We'd plug in and we'd siphon a computer, right? And I always want to use one of the students' computers. A lot of them were reticent because they knew where they'd been on the internet and everything. I was like, hey, every one of you, all these guys, I said, you're all peers, right? Yes, we're going to laugh, we're going to cry, we're going to have a good time this week, but whatever happens here stays in the classroom, right? You've committed a felony. Please don't let me on your thing, because I'm going to be required. But other than that, hey, every one of us goes somewhere in the internet. Right. The other thing I wanted to teach him was, this is the footprint that you create when you're on the internet. Right. But then we started talking about browsers. And so we went to Firefox, and then we used the old thing. We used NoScript. NoScript was great for a bunch of reasons. One, it completely broke every website if you just ran it in its full glory. Right. But that was a great learning tool, because all of a sudden it said, hey, my term was, I want to show you what the internet's doing to you.
Right.
What it is, right? And we do the drop down. There'd be all these scripts, and you're like, how do I know which ones? I said, get to learn to love finding out what these, what all these companies are doing to you, right? And you'd go to some company, they'd be paying, per click for have all these scripts running to get analytics. And then you'd go to Facebook, and it would just be a Facebook script, but it would say there were 14 scripts running. Why? Because Facebook created all their own, and they bundled it under one click, so you couldn't be discreet about what you were doing. Right?
Exactly.
The guys all of a sudden would get mad, because they're all type A personalities, and they're like, where do these people live? I want to go kick their butts, right? Okay, it doesn't work that way. Right? We're defensive now. We have to stop them. And so they saw the value in taking that extra second and having to click, because now they're really knowledgeable about what's going on and why. You can show them that if I logged on to cars.com in one zip code, the page that presented itself would be Alexa. If I logged on in another zip code, it might be a low-end Toyota.
That's right.
Right, because they were using algorithms to say, by zip code, what's the demographic and who am I most likely to attract, right? And so you start talking about a much bigger topic just by getting them pissed off that the internet's beating them up. All these guys would go home. And when they went home, they would go to their, this is back, people had iMacs desktops still, right? Because it was, 2009, 2010, right? People were still gravitating towards everybody having a laptop in the home. And they would come back in the next day. Well, what happened? They would go home and they would strip off every other browser, put Firefox in there, or force their family into this, right? I would get texts. So if I knew some of the wives or girlfriends, they would text me and be like, why did you teach my husband this? He's dumb, right? And I don't want to do this. My favorite line of all, and one of the guys came in and he was just, hands in his head, dumbfounded. He goes, yeah, I go, because the next day I would always go, okay, I didn't tell every one of you to go home and do this, but I know based on your personalities, we did. And the guy goes, I win. And I go, all right, what's the story? And he goes, I went in, I was inside, I explained it to my wife. And he goes, I didn't take whatever other browser they were using on the machine. I didn't take it off, Because I told him, I said, you take Internet Explorer off your Windows machine, you're going to break a lot of what goes on in your machine, because there's so many dependencies with Windows, especially back in the day, because I think it was Windows 7 or end of XP, right? But it's somewhere in that time frame. So you got to leave it on there, right? But you can make Firefox the default, and then it becomes you're creating another step to go backwards, right? He's explaining it to his wife, and he explained it correctly. He's like, by doing this, the internet's if you don't do anything, the internet starts to be able, through your choices, shape what you see. So you stop to see the diversity of opinion. You start to see what you want to see. And she goes, hold on, wait a second. So you mean if I do nothing, the internet's going to figure out what I like and they're going to deliver it to me? And he said, yeah. He goes, don't put that on there. Why would I ever change?
Right.
That's what we're dealing with. Right? But now, for everybody, now that we've gone on 10 or 12 years, privacy is at the forefront of everything. And it's the forefront of everything because everybody has one of these. And you don't have to make a conscious decision to sit down in front of your computer. Right? How many times you have a discussion with people in our age group, and people say, I wonder how this works. Right? And then somebody go, oh yeah, I've got my phone. I can just go look it up and Google it and figure out how it works. Right?
Yeah. Right. And it's amazing. In this class yesterday, we were talking about primes, and I'm like, listen, you were told wrong in elementary school. 1 is not a prime number. Forget it. It's not. It breaks its own rules. And they're all like, what? I'm like, dude, look it up. Fact check me.
Let's start with 3. Right?
Yeah. Right. And they did. And so that that age group is a juxtaposition to what you're saying. We were talking about earlier. They're perfectly comfortable. What they're trying to get comfortable with is taking that, actualizing it, and actually engaging in the conversation, right? Like it's perfectly okay to look things up and ask questions or say, hey, look, I think that's wrong. Please.
Right. Yeah. But again, that's that question authority, right? No great advance in life has ever come without dissent, period.
Right.
Period. Right. There's you look at my things. I look at the Supreme Court now today, right? And this isn't political at all, right? But whoever's sitting in the presidency, it's one of the prerogatives they have to put people on the court, right? Constitutional requirement that they do that with the advice and consent of the Senate, right? You look through history, and people, if a Democrat's in office, they put people, actually not even that. Who's ever in office will try to put somebody on the court who politically, when I say politically, in their writings, that's really how you judge people, right? What are their decisions and how they're written? In their writings, they try to decipher if this person agrees with them or not.
Right.
And then we're surprised when a justice gets appointed and they agree with the president that appointed them, right? It's crazy, right? The one, and this has happened throughout history a little bit, but I think the most glaring person just tried to say, hey, when we were moving towards an imperial presidency was with Franklin Roosevelt. And I think it was, and I'm don't at me, folks, but I think it was his 3rd term. I could be incorrect on that. He tried to pack the Supreme Court. And he tried to do it by constitutionally changing the number of justices we had on there. He wanted to go to 11, I think. So he could get 2 more justices and pack it on. There was 2 other. He was effectively going to, in his lifetime as president, be able to appoint every justice, if they were allowed to do that. And people finally reeled him in. That right there was trying to stamp out dissent, because the judicial branch is the only branch of the government that is designed to protect the minority.
Right.
And if you pack the court, right, then the only way that you can pack the court is to have multiple terms, and the more terms we give a president, the more they can do that. And that, more than anything, was at the very heart of creating the constitutional amendment to put him to 2 terms.
Right.
But then the people that limited them to 2 terms won't limit themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the oddities of our system of government, right? But when you start thinking about that, go back through history, and every great advance started with somebody either going, I don't think your opinion on that's correct, or mathematically I can prove that it's wrong. Right? And that's where we're at with computers, right? all of a sudden somebody said, I don't think that we've found the limits of chip speed and size. And that's what fueled the mobile bonanza.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because what we did on a computer in 1999, you couldn't do on this, right? Because it had to be too big, it was too slow. And it's the reason that we depended on the SIM card for so long. For those of you that weren't around with feature phones, and I don't know why they ever called them that, because they didn't have many features. But before smartphones, the address book and your chat, your text log was on the SIM card,
Right.
And it's the reason that a text message is limited to a certain amount of characters. Actually, that's not true. A text message is limited to a certain amount of characters. In the old days, they were limited to I think 140 characters, because that turned out to be the size of the keep alive signal that used to go across the wire to keep the network up. Right. So they had to do that as an unattended task. And they said, well, why don't we just put a payload in there, and now we'll make money off it. And they used to charge you by the text. And it was an ingenious idea just to make straight cash, homie. Right. But those texts were stored on your smartphone, and you were limited to your address book was a certain size. And so you still had to write this down. When you went to smartphones, and now that was offloaded onto the storage of the phone, because we minimized storage and processing power became such that we could do it. Now, who knows what your phone number is, right? I don't know your phone number. Why? Because I have your contact.
Yeah.
Right? Or I can look you up, or I can call you on Hangouts, or I can call you on one other thing. And that was all because somebody said, I don't think we're limited in capacity and what we can do to miniaturize the world. And that really started in the 60s as a product of the space program.
Yeah.
I find that this piece of miniaturizing and getting bigger, better, and faster in a smaller package, fascinating, is how it's speeding up the trajectory of humanity. Right? Because the number one thing when the space shuttle would go up and fly around and do its thing, the single largest thing that happened, other than plastering new tiles to the thing so it wouldn't burn up on reentry, was pulling the dash out of that thing and basically putting all new computers in it that were bigger, better, faster. Right? And if you take that back to what we did to land on the moon, I mean, they did everything but have a effing slide rule out there as they were bringing it in for a landing, right?
Yeah.
It literally was the Wile E. Coyote maneuver of getting it around and hoping you were going to land there, right? And that, to me, is the fascinating thing. When you talk about educators educating thing, I think now, for a lot of very odd social reasons, good and bad, left and right, we limit thought.
Yeah.
Right? We limit people's imagination. And the people that are doing great things challenge that. They don't get trapped in that. They're not worried by the ridicule, right? Of, who was Copernicus challenging?
Yeah, right. I mean, when you really get down to it, was it church or was it society?
Right. And so as we get there and we challenge all these things, what are we doing with things? So when you talk, I know you're going to have to go soon to kind of wrap it up, to go back to the intern thing. Build your intern programs, and this is with the folks that are with the folks that want to come in and participate. As my presentation, I would start with, Copernicus was about chucked out of the Society of Smart Thinking People because he challenged who, right? And then build it and go on there and talk about what we want to challenge a paradigm. Right. And if I start saying socially, I can't have a different opinion, right? Conservative, liberal, whatever it is, because everybody walks to one end of the room or the other and they shout at each other, right?
Right.
We can't build in the university a space where we can talk about things that make us uncomfortable and challenge dominant paradigm, right? To use a really badly coined phrase over time, right? If I can't do that, we're going to stop advancing in science and technology for any other reason than to make money.
Yeah, right.
Well, do you want to be part of that, or do you want to continue the path that we're currently on? And I think from there you'll build a better student, you'll build a better graduate, right? Because what do you want? Why did you get a PhD? or because you're inquisitive. Let's
Yeah.
start doing that when they're 18 years old, and not wait till, we filtered it out of them till such a small group of people want to go do that.
Right. And hopefully it's not completely extinguished when you're in your 30s.
Yeah. I mean, I think today, because people are like, hey, for being the age end, people are like, you're relatively young, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to somebody that wants me to help them out for do some work for them, right? And like the amount of energy you have, right? I'm like, go be around young people, go be inquisitive, like wake up every day and go, I got to learn something today, right?
Exactly.
And I think your internship program, I can't wait to help you out on that, by the way.
I'm super excited, man. Because I frame it like this, like, let's agree, because this is an indisputable fact that in 4 to 6 billion years, our solar system's dead.
Right.
That's not arguable. The sun will die, and we're going to suffer complete extinction events across all the planets in our solar system. I personally have become obsessed with getting our species out of here so that we can survive that.
Right.
Okay? There's tons of other problems out there. I get it. But this is the one, for whatever reason, tickles my fancy. There's a lot of big, small problems, if you follow me, along the way to actually making that real. And 4 to 6 billion years may seem like a long time, but some of these problems are really fucking hard.
You know what I would tell people to do? And I don't know if they're still active or not, but I used to be out there, and it's called the Society for Long Now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
These folks, they just get together and they ponder what's going to happen 10,000 years from now.
Right.
And then they try to walk it back to how we can accelerate getting to there. Right. And some of it's very far-fetched and everything like that. But I think when you start saying, hey, and we make any great leap in any space in humanity, it's because somebody says, I'm not scared to leap out of that group of dominant thought and go. Right. It's how we figured out the Earth was round. Right. I mean,
I was just going to say that.
We're on a trajectory of exploration. Right. And it's why we've started launching deep space satellites, and why we're now getting back. They've been there for 40 years, and just how many trillions of miles they are away from us. And the fact that we're probably getting a signal back now that was generated 20 years ago.
Right.
I didn't do the math on it, but like it only, travels so fast, and how many billions of miles away, right? But there's, we're living in the past of the solar system and excited about what we've gotten. How do we speed that up? Right.
Exactly.
And I think educationally.
I'll leave you with this, and you hit the nail on the head with like the base philosophy of what we're trying to do here with your globe issue. The Queen didn't charge Columbus with sailing to the New World because he knew how to do it. She charged him with it because he had the balls and the stupidity to try. Right.
Right.
And he didn't give a shit about what society said. He said, "I'll do it. I'll volunteer for tribute."
Yeah. Oh, but nothing great in society has ever been achieved without great sacrifice. Whether it's time, family, money, reputation being destroyed. Because how many philosophers, how many inventors, how many people over time never lived to see the fruition of their vision and were ridiculed along the way for it?
Almost every single one.
All right. Because of, I think, where we're at with the technology, and I think we're just on the cusp of the next big advance in speed, all the things that we all try to do it. But because now we start to want to have I think we're in a new era in a lot of ways of homogeneous thought, where we want everybody to think the same way about things, socially, military, wherever it comes across the thing. And it's sad because this is the first time that I can remember that it's ever been germinated in the university setting.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's the epicenter of it, because if you get a hold of them when they're learning, it's the way they're going to behave for the rest of their life. Right. Well, in my mind, the biggest purpose of sending my kids to college is to let them experience a culture different than they've grown up in, even if I disagree with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. Because if I have to say there's certain things that are baseline cultural and behavior traits that you have to give your kids before they live. It's about respect. It's about decency to other people and things like that. The rest of it, go out and find. Am I happy with every choice you make? Nope. But guess what? My parents weren't happy. Your parents weren't happy. Our parents, all those things. But that's how we grow. Because I say something. I'd like to raise you in the world I grew up in, but I don't live in that world, so I can't.
Right.
And I think now where we're saying so strictly in a lot of big universities, you've got to think this way or you're not going to pass the class.
Yeah.
Right? Jared was taking a class, and I'm not going to say which class thing, but he understood that even though he violently disagreed with the teacher, he just had to get the grade to move on because it wasn't his major and it wasn't, something years later if he's wants to seek an advanced degree, somebody go, well, that was your thought on that. And you don't want to go, hey, I just wanted the A, so I wrote what they wanted to hear.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's one of the highest crimes against humanity.
But we're going to slow down the trajectory of thought if we don't do that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
That's the crime to me, right? Yep. Is extinguishing somebody's ability to dissent. Because in every walk of life, dissent is what's made this planet great, even if we didn't realize it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I mean, I go back to the Supreme Court because I'm fascinated with the Supreme Court because of the dissent in those cases. It turns out to be case-made law. Right.
Yeah.
And whether it's, from the 60s of dealing with Jim Crow on Jeremiah and all these things, right? There's so many decisions that I may not agree with them, but you look at the eloquence of dissent, right? And that is what changes the world. Dissent in science and math and all in medicine. That's why we can take somebody's old heart out of their body and give them a new one. Because, why couldn't we? I'm not even talking about technology. Why couldn't we have done that 100 years ago? Because everybody in the Catholic Church would have lost their minds, right? Or the Protestants or the Lutherans. I don't even know which groups would have been mad about it. But the heresy of taking an organ out of somebody and giving you an organ from somebody, even if technology, we could do it.
Right.
What's the heck? We were unwilling to let somebody that had dissent, right? The concept of somebody donating their body to science so that we can have cadavers. What did most doctors do? What did most educators do? They went to graveyards and dug shit up in the middle of the night, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to change humanity. They wanted to make the human condition better. Things that killed people 100 years ago were eradicated, right?
Yeah. I mean, think about the first guy that said, "Hey, we should wash our hands."
To do the other bumper sticker, my last bumper sticker of the day, somebody subverted the dominant paradigm.
Yeah.
Right. Why in public education, why especially higher education now, why are we placing such a high priority on not being in dissent?
It's the power of status quo, man. People don't want to face the reality of being wrong for some reason.
And that's where I think, I think it even comes down to the professor level.
100%. That's who I'm talking about.
Are you free to encourage dissent?
Yeah.
Right. Is it something you want to do, or do you want people to believe what you believe, say what you say, and vote like you vote? Right. Because those are the big things. Right. I mean, that's, because everything great. And I'm like I said, and I'll repeat this all day long. Everything great in humanity we got because somebody disagreed with the way things were.
Well, to be honest, to just finish and wrap this up, if I had to take a guess at why higher education has started to shift that way, is because people figured out that if you actually go out and start a cult, they'll roll in the tanks and burn you down. Koresh in Texas, right? And so that mentality of ego-driven cult behavior transitioned into the university because it's an instant cult. It's a captive cult audience.
Yeah.
And they don't know any better because they're 18 and they're dumb. We all were at 18, right?
Yeah.
And so this mindset shifted into that space of, I don't need to free you from your shackles of normalcy and status quo. I'm going to harness that power and make my own little cult.
Right. It baffles me. I think in all disciplines in college, it hurts. Right. I mean, because you don't have philosophical changes and stuff like that, depending on where, people are afraid to write expositorily what they believe in and have a next great thought that causes maybe the next great novel.
Right.
Let's think of all the novelists that in their day were challenged for what they had written, and they want to burn the books, they want to do whatever. But those are the books that my youngest now reads in Catholic school because they are the most well-written, thought-provoking things that we have. How many of those things are we having today in math and science, in literature, in social sciences? We're not, right? People we want to And if you do, people will shout you down, right? And more importantly, if you're part of that cult that is allowed to shout dissent down, and a lot of times people get scared. You're allowed to keep doing it.
Yeah, right. Well, because you're not going to get challenged.
Like with the Antifa, right?
Yeah.
And this is my simple rule for life, YouTube audience. If you feel you have to wear a mask to cover your identity with what you're going to do, you're not right.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the first sign.
Yeah. I mean, that's like if you're walking out of the house and you want to stop somebody from saying something that this is dissent. Dissent is hard. Dissent is standing there in the middle of the room, listening to somebody shout at the top of their lungs, something you would spend the rest of your life shouting against. That's freedom, folks. It's not whatever else you might think it is. That's true freedom.
Yeah.
If you're going to free yourself, you have to be free to listen to that, even though you violently disagree with it. Right? And I have a friend of mine, he uses the term violent disagreement. And I like that, right? Because we don't want like opinion, right? We don't want everybody to have the same opinion. Like, one of the things, if you're a kid, you go to Catholic school, one of the things they're going to do at one point, one is going to come home and say, I don't believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all right. And, about that time, parents get all together and they get roughed up. My kid came home and said, I don't believe in God. Well, yes, because they go to a faith-based school, whatever faith it is, they go to a faith-based school and they want to challenge that. And they want to see how mad their parents are going to get.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just,
that's all it is.
What it is. But they want to see the mechanism to challenge authority, right? When Jared did it, I said, all right, cool. What do you believe in? And he's like, what do you mean? I go, well, you don't believe you're the supreme being, do you? He's like, no. I go, worship the head of lettuce, call him Ralph. I don't care. But like, you understand that you're not the top of the food chain, right? That you have to have faith. You have to have faith in something. I don't care what it is. I don't. You remember Andrew? Andrew, my last name's too long. Used to work for us.
Yeah.
His wife was Thai, and she was a Buddhist. And Jared I said, well, let's go talk to her.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that I would like to see come back into schools, especially faith-based schools, is comparative religion.
Yes.
Right. I think I took that class in college. I thought it wasn't in my major, wasn't anything I needed to take. It was like, I want to take that class as an elective because my God, your God, whoever it is, we're all in intent, we're all worshiping to the same thing, that we believe there's a higher power, that we're going to have faith in something else. Right. And when we start worshiping at the altar of the now, right, that my opinion is all thing. That's really what harnessing and pulling away dissent does, is it keeps us from exploring other great options. Right? I don't know how, because I'm not in that arena every day of the week, but I'd be interested to hear, like, next week, your thoughts on where you, like in math and science in particular, right? In definitely the hard sciences and engineering, what's that dissent? What's that, challenging of dissent doing to slow down progress?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I'll give it some real thought.
I think having Dan, well, we can get Dan to come in. I think that'd be a really cool thing to have, is we say we're not going to allow dissent, because I think it's mostly older folks. The older you get, the more cranky you get. And you're like, whatever, here's my opinion. I don't care. What I want you to be respectful about it. But, we want to hear that. How does stifling dissent in the universities? I think I'm not there, right? Just from what you read and hear, and actions of people on the street that are of that age group, right? That it seems to be that there's dissent that's being stifled. Let's talk about how technology can change that, right? And for good and bad, right? Because nothing's in a vacuum on a straight line to do that. And more importantly, from like your opinion, and certainly from Dan, because he sees it with interns and everything, what's considered proper dissent, right? Because that's how great changes in humanity are going to make. We have to disagree that, with the dominant thought of the day, right? In order to advance.
I think that'll be
you want to get us off this rock into a different solar system. We're not going to do it because right now the excuse is, we don't have the money. We can't take care of everybody on the planet. Right. Okay, good job, Captain Short-Sighted. Here's those big goggles that are going to keep you looking right at the problem in front of you and not allowing you to see.
Right.
I want to
I think that'll be a fantastic episode 140.
What's that?
that'll be a great topic for our next episode, which is 140.
Okay. Oh yeah, it's still on 138. Okay, cool.
I know, man.
I'm looking at it. Go 140. What are we doing? Well, are we going to travel time? Did you come up with something I missed? All right, my friend. You need to go.
All right, dude.
Get the
great conversation. Thank you. I got to go get the sides cut.
No worries. Thank you, my friend.
All right. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Have a great week, everybody.
Cheers.